bailed-out banks are paying back the massive amounts of cash the federal government dumped into them. Does that make TARP a success story? Back with our freedom fighters, Celente, Marshall, and Varney. Jerry, to you first. How could anybody argue that TARP was successful?
It was a roaring success. They bailed out gamblers that lost a lot of money, and they rewarded manufacturers that were inefficient and shouldn't have been in business because what they were making. It was the perfect thing, and it also did everything they promised it wouldn't do. They promised they were going to help 4 million homeowners. This was for the little people.
Right.
460,000 were helped.
Leslie, wasn't it basically a fraud? I mean, didn't President Bush and Secretary Paulson go to the Congress and say, we're going to buy toxic mortgage assets and we're going to stop foreclosures? They didn't buy a single toxic mortgage asset. They didn't stop a single foreclosure. They just shoved cash down the throats of banks, many of whom didn't want it and didn't need it.
I think they were looking for WMDs on Wall Street, Judge. Actually, they sold a bill of goods, and unfortunately, Congress, the former president, the current president, did not listen to the American people. Left or right, myself included, majority of Americans were against this. And the reason is, hey, look, you know, in the private sector, you know, if you screw up, you screw up. You don't get a second chance, and you certainly don't have the government coming to bail you out.
And you don't get a safety net from the government. Now, my dear Stuart, I want to read something to you. Quote, "The government wants to control the banks just as it now controls GM and Chrysler, and will surely control the health industry in the not-too-distant future. Keeping them TARP stuffed is the key to control. And for this intensely political president, mere influence is not enough. The White House wants to tell him what to do. Control, direct, command." Do you know who said that?
I believe it was me.
In the Wall Street Journal. Do you still agree with that, what you wrote a year ago? Control, direct, and command was the real reason for TARP?
Let me take you back to September the 18th, 2008. America and the world were on the edge of an abyss. The government acted with TARP. It stopped a financial panic, the first financial panic we had seen in 100 years. I think the government did the right thing. It was effective. It stopped the panic. And I think the government has an obligation to act in those circumstances to prevent 25 Lehman bankruptcies the following week.
Does it not matter that they borrowed the money from the Chinese? Does it not matter that they saved some and let others die on the vine? And where did they draw that line?
You're arguing principle. I'm arguing practicality. It worked. Without it, we would have had a catastrophe. Thank heavens for Mr. Paulson.
Jerry, the government is still owed $70 billion from GM. How are they going to get $70 billion from a company that isn't even worth half of that?
And not only that, they have all this other toxic paper from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's a fraud. There was never ever any evidence that this thing was going to collapse if Goldman Sachs didn't get money, if Credit Suisse didn't get money, if Barclays, if Deutsche Bank didn't get money. To me, it was a big hoax. They didn't do what they pledged they were going to do.
Lunchtime, Thursday, September the 18th, the money funds in America, the Putnam Group of funds, froze up. Goldman couldn't get at its money. That is a financial panic.
Wouldn't it have been better to let the people that mismanaged the banks fall by the wayside and let others pick up the pieces that worked, like when Barclays picked up the pieces of Lehman Brothers that worked and turned them profitable?
Yes, because last time I checked, that's the American way. That's the private sector, and we need to have a distinction between the private and the public sector. What we see here, guys, is politics in its finest. Maybe TARP worked for the idea and perception of the American people, but we're not seeing, and I think it is too early to tell, quite frankly, where it has worked economically.
You would take the risk of 25 Lehman bankruptcies in the following week. You would roll the dice with that kind of thing, and a 25% unemployment rate the month after. You, Judge, would take that risk?
I would let the free market take care of this, and that's the way it should be. Otherwise, you set a false impression that you can be as risky as you want, and the government will back you up.